So far in my World of Warcraft journey, I have leveled 3 entire characters, my warrior, my mage, and my beautiful druid. Each having their own entirely different leveling experience. I also decided to try out the horde side of things with my rogue, which has been great so far. However, we have put the horde adventure on pause for now, because I recently gained the need for a hunter. But what could I possibly need a hunter so badly for? Well, that's a story for another time. So for now, it's time to return to the Alliance once more as I attempt to level my first ever hunter alongside my trusty pet, Gerald. Last time, we managed to hit level 25 by exploring through Red Ridge Mountains, Ashenvale, the Wetlands, and even Stone Talon Mountains. And we ended it all with running what is possibly the worst dungeon in the entire game, the Stormwind Stockades. For today, I want to set myself 3 separate goals to run 3 different dungeons. First is Blackfathom Deeps, the second is Gnomeregan, and the third is Razorfen Kraul. Starting the day off, we were in Red Ridge Mountains, slowly walking over to Duskwood for a bit of questing. Once we were here, I did all of the regular things, like picking up the flight point and collecting quests, before I started heading over to the west side of the zone, because all of the quests to the west are much lower level, and I didn't want to outgrow them. Now, Duskwood is a zone that I very much look forward to questing in. Now, subscribers of the channel will know that I originally hated this zone because of the aesthetic. I've never been much of a fan of the whole dark and spooky thing. However, the reason this place has grown on me is because of how simple and straightforward the questing is. If you look at my quest log, you notice that all of the quests are kill this thing and then kill that thing, and that's what I love doing. Chilling, running around the entire zone, murdering anything that moves. And I started that off with wolf murder, because that's like 95% of World of Warcraft. I then ran up and down the western edge of the zone to kill spiders. I then went to the graveyard to collect ghoul fangs, which got us to level 26. I then attempted to turn in whatever quest was down here, but yeah, that didn't quite go how I wanted it to. So after failing that, I paid a visit to the eastern graveyard, where we needed to kill skeletons and tear off their fingers. Next up was the Worgans, which were all a bit higher level than me, so it kind of felt like it was just a kite fest. But we got that down easy enough since it was only 6 of them. And you know, since I was close by, I decided that I want to try turning in whatever the quest was down here again. But these stupid stealth mobs don't seem to like me very much. So once again, I decided to leave it alone, and instead, I decided to return to Darkshire to turn in the first round of quests. I mean, is there a better feeling than being able to march back into town and turn in a million different quests? Well, of course, the only thing that rivals that is having a warrior steal my best in slot leather shoulders last week and then not even equipping them. That's a classic. So I thought, what better way to start off the next round of quests than by going back to the stupid house surrounded by stealth mobs. Yup. Really starting to hate whatever this quest is, but my curiosity had peaked. I had to know what was being kept from me, so I strategically pulled each mob and managed to clear the house out, only to discover that the quest wasn't even inside the house, but is in fact outside, buried under the ground. Yeah, I'm not so sure that was worth it. So with that out of the way, I returned to the western graveyard once again, where we killed skeletons and spiders. Simple enough. And this is where I also discovered the coolest ability in the entire game, Eyes of the Beast, aka Gerald Vision. Now, I'm not sure if this has any actual practicality to it, but I just thought it was so cool. And then finally for Duskwood was the simple task of collecting some Rot Blossom. Now, this is also where I got absolutely decimated by a mage, and I think I'm going to need you guys to help me out with Hunter PvP a bit, because what the hell am I supposed to do in this situation, where they position themselves in the perfect place so that they are too close for me to shoot them, but also too far away for me to melee them. But anyway, I respawned, finished the quest, and I turned it in. Now this is where I started to get a little bit bored of Duskwood, and I wanted a change of scenery. So I had a look at my map, and I noticed that there was actually still a massive amount of quests to get done in the Wetlands, and also that last time I forgot to pick up the flight point there, so I had no choice but to catch a bird to Lochmoden and start running. Now, I was making my way over to the Wetlands when I had a rather interesting message from a little dwarf dwarf, asking if I wanted to join him and his friends for a run of Shadowfang Keep. And at first, I didn't really want to, but then I remembered that I've never done Shadowfang Keep before. So eventually, I said sure, why the hell not? And since there aren't any flight points even somewhat close to Shadowfang Keep, we all met up in a Rathy and began running together. And you know, it's the simple things like this that make classic WoW feel alive. A group of 5 people with the same goal, traversing through the open world. And well, after a good 10 or so minutes of running, we arrived at the dungeon entrance and we could get started. Now, like I said, this is my first time ever running Shadowfang Keep in Classic, but it was one of the first ever dungeons that I did in retail when I first tried the game years ago, and it's so cool to be able to see where the things that I was somewhat familiar with came from. And I gotta say, there's not been a single instance yet that I thought the retail version was better. But anyway, we cleared up the first boss and patiently waited for the door to be unlocked, and that's when I encountered every hunter's worst nightmare. I had ran out of arrows. So, melee hunter for me it was, which I gotta say, really wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. Now, I thought this dungeon was really cool. Everything about it felt so well crafted and really created the feeling that you were inside of a haunted keep. In fact, I enjoyed it so much that I actually went on to have a little read on the lore in this place after we were finished, and we were making some pretty good progress in the dungeons where things started to go a little bit south, because very suddenly, a massive swarm of Worgen begins charging down the stairs, and really our only choices were to either die or reset the mobs. And well, thanks to this roof, we were able to slip out of the dungeon nice and quickly, and we could then continue the dungeon in a civilized manner. And well, eventually, we make it to the final boss, Archmage Arugal. Now, although I thought the dungeon was cool, we really didn't gain that much XP, and that's because apart from the final section of the dungeon, every mob was grey for me. That being said, I don't regret doing it, because I think it's important that we get to experience absolutely everything that World of Warcraft has to offer. I logged on the next day and I was ready to grind some levels, and I wanted to go back to the Wetlands, only to remember that I still hadn't gotten the flight point yet. But once we got to Menethil, I of course started by picking up all of the nearby quests, and I did almost forget to pick up the flight point again. And as I was heading out to do some quests, I saw in the chat that someone was looking to do the elite quests. So naturally, I sent him a message and we managed to form a very reliable group consisting of 3 priests and a hunter. And you know, elite quests are elite quests. Sometimes they can be interesting, but really, as long as you have a group, you will be completely fine. Almost like an outdoors dungeon. Well, I say it's completely fine, but somehow we managed to pull the entire of the Wetlands at once. We can blame Gerald. But apart from that, it was completely fine. And turning in those quests got us to level 28. But the follow-up quest would offer us a belt that would give me an entire 1 agility upgrade, and it would require us to go all the way back to Stormwind and run the Stockades, which I just didn't really think was worth it. But I did it anyway, and I managed to find myself this janky group that was attempting to do like a spell cleave kind of thing, which is great for me since all I really needed to do was stand back and let the mage do his thing. And for this quest, we just needed to kill one of the mini bosses that spawns inside and bring his head back to the quest giver. But apart from the mage dying twice, the run was smooth, and I could return to the Wetlands and claim my slightly useless belt. Once back, I got started with a quest that would require us to run around the west coast and slay giant crocolisks to take their skin. Next, I went over to the Dragon Maw Orcs where I decided to unboon. And originally, I thought this quest might be a bit annoying, since they like to use nets to root you in place, but thanks to my rallying cry of the Dragon Slayer, we were able to slice through them like it was nothing. I then went into this isolated pocket in the mountain where I came across a couple of quest givers, and they sent us on a quick raptor rampage. Once I turned that in, I got started with the next quest, which was Raptor Rampage version 2. Only this time we needed to pick up fragments of something. And lastly, we needed to slay Sorreltooth. And that was it. We had completed the Wetlands. Well, mostly. The only remaining quest was the Cursed Crew, and if you watched my Druid series, which I suggest you do, then you'll know exactly how much I hate this quest. I returned to Stormwind only to discover that someone had adopted a rather strange looking dog. Some might call him Teramis the Devourer, but apart from that, I wanted to get my weapon enchanted with Fiery Weapon. Some would say that's completely useless for a hunter. However, I just think it makes me look cool. And with that out of the way, my next plan was to head into Blackfathom Deeps to crack out our first of the 3 dungeons. So I hopped on a bird and began flying towards Ashenvale. Now it took a while for us to find a group and to get started, like almost an entire hour. And to be honest, I can see why. It's long, you don't get a massive amount of XP, and there's next to no good loot. That being said though, there is a good handful of quests for you to complete. And in my opinion, this is a great dungeon, purely because it feels like a lot of care went into making it. And I actually did do a little lore research on this one too, and I found it really cool. Turns out it's an old temple that's now half underwater and taken over by the Twilight cultists, and Akumai is actually the pet of the old gods. Is that not insanely cool? So we take down the first 2 bosses and make it into the Murloc boss, and I don't know about you, but every single time I've ever done this dungeon, something bad always seems to happen at this part right here. But our tank had a brain, and we were able to get through all of the ads and the boss without any problem. And we could also pick up this weird orb thing for a very useless buff. Now as for the loot in here, like I said, none of it is particularly eye-catching. In fact, I don't think there is a single piece of loot in here that would be an upgrade whatsoever. Now up until this point here, the run had been absolutely flawless, but we overpulled just a little and sadly we wiped. But we respawned and pretty quickly we were standing in front of the second to last boss. Now I've always liked the next part. Before you can progress onto the final boss, you've got to take out 4 waves of mobs. Pretty cool and pretty notorious for wiping groups because someone thinks it's a fantastic idea to click all 4 of them at once. But we clear those up and head on through. And at first, I didn't even realize that we were fighting the boss because I'm so used to running the retail version and seeing a massive snake head flopping out of the ground. But that's it. We had completed a run of Blackfathom Deeps. So that's 1 down and 2 to go. Now, I was able to get a group for Gnomeregan significantly quicker than Blackfathom Deeps. And well, we got to the entrance and I discovered that I was in fact locked out of dungeons for another 6 minutes. But these guys were pretty chill and they said it's fine, they can wait. And well, I caught up with my team and they were already at Grubbis, which is great for me since I don't have to sit through that boring scenario. So here's the thing about Gnomeregan. When I first did it way back on my Warrior Fart and Sniff, I loved it. It was big, it was mysterious, and it was new for me. However, since then, I've slowly grown a massive hatred for this dungeon, like with every fibre of my being. And well, that's because I main Feral Druid, and the best in slot weapon for Feral Druids is of course the Manual Crowd Pummeler, a weapon that increases attack speed. But the thing about this weapon is that it only has 3 charges. 3 charges that once used will never replenish. And I use between 6 and 10 of them every week, which means I've quite literally ran this dungeon hundreds of times. I mean hell, maybe even in the thousands by now. But we clear up the first few bosses in the dungeon and we get to the Manual Crowd Pummeler. And would you believe, it actually does drop. Lucky for the druid that was with us, because apart from having an absolutely insane ability, its stats are actually quite insane too, especially at this level. But eventually, we make it to the final boss, Mechgineer Thermoplug, and he was significantly higher level than all of us, at a big level 34, but thanks to my epic kiting skills, we were able to get him down, and that's it. We had completed a run of Gnomeregan, which marks 2 down and only 1 to go. And the final dungeon on the list is of course Razorfen Kraul. Now this has always been a bit of a weird dungeon for me. I don't particularly like the dungeon, but I also don't hate it. If someone asked me to define the word meh, I could just show them this dungeon. On the bright side though, there are quite a lot of mobs here and the XP is quite plentiful. As for the loot here, there is actually quite a few different pieces. More specifically, the Feline leggings would offer 9 strength and 8 agility, which would be an insanely big upgrade for us. And it has a 62% chance of dropping, which is great. The other thing to look forward to in here is a rare mob called the Blind Hunter, and we could either tame him or he could also drop the Night Stalker bow, one of the best hunter weapons available to me right now. So that's just another thing to look forward to. And well, we get into the bat infested cave and no Blind Hunter is in sight. I also got murdered by said bats. So we move on to Agathelos the Raging, the boss that can drop our leggings. And halfway through the fight, the boss decided to take a little nap. Never seen that before. And well, the legs actually do drop, which I was very happy with. And then we went and did the final boss, Chargla Razorflank, who dropped a little shield for the tank. But before we left the dungeon, we could first drop down to do the escort quest. And well, after that we were done. We had completed a run of Razorfen Kraul, which marks 3 out of 3 dungeons finished and completed. I hope you all enjoyed today's video because I enjoyed making it. Gotta say, I'm really having a lot of fun with Hunter. When I first started, I thought maybe I wouldn't like it so much because of how fidgety taking care of pets can sometimes be and having to teach them abilities and such. But no, it's actually just another thing to add on top. As for content, I'm still in the process of recording another druid video. My plan was to do another druid video soon, but my recent raids really haven't gone so well. And I have managed to obtain literally 0 loot, but that's just how it goes sometimes. The other thing I would like to say is that you can now become a channel member. You get access to loyalty badges, a custom emoji thingy, and priority reply to comments. And I also plan in the near future to give members access to all unlisted, deleted, and unreleased videos, just as a bit of extra content. And members will also be in charge of things like choosing the next classes I play, the next race I play, etc, etc. And if there's anything else you think would be good for members, then let me know in the comments and I will get it sorted. And of course, remember, like and subscribe, since we are getting close to 10,000 subscribers, which is actually just insane to even say. Anyway, I think that is enough yapping for today. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you all later.